Welcome to the Living Philosophy Podcast. I am your host, Vince Lopes. If this is your first time here, this podcast is an invitation to slow down and reflect on what it means to be human in a living, changing world. In this episode, I want to pause and dive more deeply into what I call depth philosophy, the orientation that quietly shapes everything else in this podcast. Depth philosophy begins with a few simple but far-reaching questions. What is the world we find ourselves in? What kind of beings are we, really? And how are we meant to live within this world we inhabit? These questions are ancient, but they feel newly urgent today in a time of ecological crisis, cultural fragmentation, and widespread existential uncertainty. But what is depth philosophy? Depth philosophy is not a system, doctrine, or worldview imposed from above. It is a non-dogmatic philosophical orientation that emphasizes lived ethical responsibility and participatory understanding over inherited conventions or abstract theories. It begins from a simple but profound insight. Reality is not composed of isolated, inert objects, but of living relationships, dynamic, meaningful, and mutually shaping. At its core, depth philosophy seeks to bring into dialogue the transformative wisdom of ancient spiritual traditions with modern insights from depth psychology, especially Jung, and contemporary physics, including David Bohm's relational understanding of reality. The aim is not synthesis for its own sake, but cultivation, a way of thinking and living that is simultaneously philosophical and experiential. Depth philosophy is grounded in empirical reality, yet open to mystery, critical without becoming reductive, and rooted in the recognition that to know the world is always also to participate in its unfolding. One of the guiding insights behind depth philosophy is this: whenever we speak about nature, humanity, or the cosmos, we are already standing on invisible ground. Assumptions inherited from science, religion, culture, economics, and philosophy. Some traditions assume the world as inert matter. Others assume humans are fundamentally separate from nature. Some claim consciousness belongs only to human minds. Others begin by asserting that the world itself is alive and sentient. Depth philosophy does not begin by declaring any of these positions true or false. Instead, it pauses. It asks, what happens if we hold these assumptions lightly? What happens if we allow the questions themselves to remain open? This does not mean pretending we have no presuppositions. That would be impossible. It means cultivating a disciplined openness, a willingness to revise our ideas as lived experience. Holding assumptions lightly also means listening, not only to human voices, but to landscapes, ecosystems, histories, and the deep time that shaped us. It means accepting that the world may disclose itself in ways that unsettle our categories. Depth philosophy can be understood as a path of inquiry, one that seeks to bridge the apparent divide between the outer material world and the inner qualitative world of experience. This path is walked through attentive perception, reflective practice, and lived engagement rather than abstract belief alone. Here, truth is not imposed from outside. It is not secured through authority or consensus, but revealed through alignment with the deeper patterns of reality as they show themselves in experience. To walk this path is to recognize three orienting insights. First, everything is interconnected. Beneath the surface of appearances lies a relational field from which all beings arise, encounter one another, and co-evolve. Separation is a practical appearance, not an ultimate fact. Second, meaning runs deep. Dreams, symbols, intuitions, and inner images are not merely private fantasies, but expressions of the same formative patterns shaping the unfolding cosmos. Every act of awareness is a way the universe comes to know and express itself through us. Third, life is cosmological becoming. All beings, human and more than human alike, participate in an ongoing movement of creativity, differentiation, and integration, unfolding toward greater depth, coherence, and relational complexity. When we speak of depth philosophy, we do not mean philosophy about life alone. We mean philosophy as a living practice. Here, living refers to process, relationship, and becoming. It points to a way of thinking that is responsive rather than rigid, one that evolves as understanding deepens. This requires careful attention to lived experience. The world is not a static backdrop. The human is not a fixed essence. Meaning is not imposed from outside. World, self, and significance co-emerge moment by moment through relationship. Depth philosophy is ultimately concerned with life and living, with what it means to be alive with others here on earth. It invites us to think carefully about concepts such as environment, ecology, economics, and extension, not as abstractions, but as realities that shape how we organize our lives and relate to the world. A key implication of this perspective is the rejection of two familiar roles humans often assign themselves. We are not masters of the world, standing above it, entitled to dominate and extract, but neither we are accidental bystanders, thrown into a meaningless universe watching from the sidelines. We are participants in the unfolding history of the cosmos. This participation carries responsibility, not as rulers, but as members of a complex, evolving community of life and process. Before we close, I want to return briefly to those who may be listening for the first time. This podcast is not asking you to adopt a new belief system or philosophical position. It is simply an invitation to pause, to listen, and to notice how the world meets you when you do. Depth philosophy is not something to master. It is an invitation to slow down, to question what we take for granted, thinking with the world rather than over it. For now, I invite you to sit with these questions, not to answer them too quickly, but to let them work on you quietly over time. Perhaps the most important text of philosophy today is not to tell us what the world is, but to help us learn how to listen to what is becoming. Until next time, may you listen deeply, live gently, and remember yourself as part of this living planet we call home.